Hello students and professionals who are working in the security field. My name is Raimundas Kalasnikas. I'm professor at the University of Kazimieras Simonavičius in Vilnius, Lithuania. And today I would like to present my video lessons on the topic scope, context and risk criteria in the context of security risk management. Learning objectives of that lessons is first, provide knowledge about a systematic approach to the security risk management process, understand where to start when assessing the scope of security risk management for an organization in the line of ISO 31000, be familiar with the requirements and importance of establishing the context of organization to manage security risk, and be able to define criteria according to which risk would be determined and assessed in the security management process. Starting from the systematic approach to the security risk management is very important to understand the concept of a security risk management under the ISO 31000 on the 2018 version. Is the new versions for the risk management standard which are recognized internationally. Security risk management at the organizations is an ongoing process of identifying security risk and implementing various plans to address them. For example, cyber attack, crime, human behavior, etc., as well as controlling how risk might impact the achievement of business goals. Security management provides a means of better understanding the nature of security threats and their interaction at individual, organizational, or community level. Managing security risk is part of their governance and leadership. It is fundamental to how the organization is managed security risk at all levels. Top management is responsible for the integration of security risk management to overall business strategies, starting with the governance of the organization, and management security risk within the organization based on the three pillars: the principles, framework, and process outlined in ISO 31000. These three pillars must be applied in full scale within the organization that allow to manage risk in efficient, effective, and consistent way. Starting point in the process of a security risk management is very often depends from the systematic application of the management policies, procedures, and practices to the activities of communicating and consulting, establishing the context and assessing, treating, monitoring, reviewing, recording, and reporting security risk. Management security risk considers the external and internal factors, also the internal and external context of the organizations, including human behavior and cultural factors. The context of establishing process of a security risk management receive input all relevant information about the organization, and establishing the context for the security risk management determines the purpose of the purpose. It involves setting risk criteria to be used in the security risk management process, defining the scope and boundaries of the security risk management process, and establishing an appropriate organization operating in the security risk management process. The purpose of the establishing the scope, context, and criteria is to customize the risk management process, enabling effective risk assessment and appropriate risk treatment. Scope, context, and criteria in that process involve two elements. First of all, defining the scope of the risk management process, and second, understanding the external and internal context in both ways, of the process and organization which are operate in the business environment. The organization should define the scope of its security risk management activities. First of all, the risk management process can be applied at different levels: strategic, operational, program, project, technical, tactical, or other levels could be applied to the different level of the organizations. But when organizations start to the planning the approach for the security risk management, considerations should be include the following. First of all, objectives and decisions that need to be made, outcomes expected from the steps to be taken in the security risk management process, time, location, specific inclusion and exclusions, appropriate risk assessment tools and techniques, resources required, it could be financial, technological, human resources, responsibilities and records to be kept. And the last is relation with the other projects, process and activities. And according to that consideration, organization should clearly define the scope of the security risk management. The external and internal context is the environment in which the organization seeks to define and achieve its objectives. And the context of the security risk management process should be established from the understanding external and internal environment in which organization operates, and should reflect the specific environment of the activities through which the risk management process is to be applied. Usually, organizations should ensure that security risk management is integrated into all organizational business activities and design the framework for managing security risk. From the practitioners which are working in this field, usually that framing are designed in the strategic programs or strategic documents of the organization. The organization should establish the external and internal context of the risk management process by considering the external and internal factors which are affected organization activities. For example, security risk can arise due to external or internal influence. For example, external security risks are exposures that results from the environmental conditions that the organization commonly cannot influence, such as the regulatory environment or business market conditions. Internal security risks are exposures that derive from the decision making and the use of the internal and external resources, including the organization's operations and its objectives. Examining the organization's external context may include, but is not limited to, the social, cultural, political, legal, regulatory, financial, technological, economic, and other environmental factors, which are usually focusing on the international, national, regional, or local conditions. Second, key drivers and trends affecting the objectives of the organizations. And it could be various objectives which our organization act in the field of the security issue. External stakeholders, perception, values, and needs of the expectations from the stakeholders. Contractual relationships and commitments, the complexity of networks and dependencies. Examining the organization's internal context might include vision, mission, and values, governance, organizational structure, roles and accountabilities, strategy, objectives, and policies, the organization culture, standard guidelines and models adopted by the organization, capabilities understood in terms of resources and knowledge, for example, capital, time, people, intellectual property, processes, systems, and technologies. Data information system and information flows, relationship with the internal stakeholders taking into account their perception and values, contractual relationships and commitments, interdependencies and interconnections. That two components or factors with examining of the organization context also should be reflected in the process, which are also defining the scope of the security risk management activities. And the importance of understanding the context is the following. The first, security risk management takes place in the context of the organization's objectives and activities. Second, on the organizational factors, external and externals, can be a source of a risk. And third, the purpose of the scope of the security risk management process may be interrelated with the objectives of the organization as a whole. At the beginning of the risk assessment process, the organization should specify the amount and type of the risk that it may or may not take relative to the organization's objectives. Security risk criteria sets the organization tolerance for the risk. It should also define criteria to evaluate the significance of the risk and to support decision-making process. Usually the decision-making process is taken by the top leadership of the organization. Risk criteria should be aligned with the risk management framework and customized to the specific purpose and scope of the activity under consideration. Also, the risk criteria should reflect the organization values, objectives, and resources, and be consistent with the policies and statement about security risk management in the organization. There are some requirements which are set by ISO 31000 for defining risk criteria, and that requirements is the following. First of all, the risk criteria should be defined taking into considerations the organization's obligations and the views of the stakeholders. Secondly, we should keep in mind that before defining the risk criteria, we are following that threats to the organization's security and in general security threats are dynamic, and accordingly to that, risk criteria also they are dynamic and should be continually reviewed and amended if necessary for the organization businesses. To set risk criteria, the following should be considered. First of all, the nature, type of uncertainties that can affect outcomes and objectives for the organizations. It could be both tangible and intangible. How consequences, both positive or negative, and likelihood will be defined and measured. Time-related factors, consistency in the use of measurements, and how the level of the risk is to be determined, how combinations and sequences of multiple risks will be taken into account, and organization capacities to realize the defined risk criteria in the following processes, what we are called on the risk assessment, which occur risk identification, risk analysis, and risk treatment. So, summarizing that lessons, we could make conclusions that the scope, context, and criteria in the security risk management process in the starting point for the following actions under the process of the security risk management. Thank you.